Hey, everybody. Nee, ich mache ja Deutsch. Genau, Helena macht ja Englisch. Ja, liebes verehrtes Publikum, wir sind jetzt nach einer kurzen Pause zurück für den zweiten Table Talk. Wir sind ein bisschen über die Zeit und würden das jetzt mit so 45 bis 60 Minuten, damit wir danach auch noch eine Pause haben für den Nachmittagsimbiss. Ich werde ganz kurz unsere Impulsreferentin Petra Halatschkova, richtig? Halatschkova?
I will introduce Petra Halatschkova. We still have space here at the table, so I want to offer this to anyone to you who would like to join. It's okay. It's not, the concept was not that we just have these three at the table. Everybody can come and join. Martina. So the second table talk is happening now. I just repeat what we did in the first table talk. For the people who just joined us, we looked at the different movements in the East and the West, which is also a focus of our cooperation within this festival Bauhaus Modern Emancipation, Education Exchange, which is taking place in the Bauhaus week in Berlin. And you've heard it in the beginning. Now we will extend with the second table talk the view, and we will get more concrete. We start with the extension of the notion emancipation and the liberation movement. We have heard about the different milestones, and we're talking about the gender debate in the transnational perspective. How does emancipation and the gender debate influence the public space, but also the construction space? This will become very relevant here. But the public space is not the environment of construction. This is also socially constructed space, and there's also a digital public space. So we should also ask the question, how can we combine the protest culture and other initiatives or movements without space and without protest or demonstrations? How can we look at, for example, Me Too as part of the digital space? And how can we, where do we put it in the context of emancipation? I will introduce all three protagonists that sit with me at the table, even though that Petra Halatschkova she will start. So, Petra, would you like to introduce her, Helena?
Ne? Oder also ich, okay. Dann mache ich. Petra Halatschkova is cultural reviewer, curator and documentarist based in Brno, Czech Republic, focusing on feminist in brackets art theory, gender issues, politics, body and architecture. She also provides research and consultation in the field of gender equality and gender in relation to public space. Petra is also commentator and reviewer of magazines and newspapers, A2 Arc Talk, Art Antiques, A2 Alarm, and so on, and author and editor of the Brno Architectural Manual, which we were also in contact on other issues, I figure, a guide to 1918 to 1945 architecture. What is a freely accessible database on Brno modern architecture, if you don't know. Petra is co-founder of 4AM Forum for Architecture and Media Association, where she was curator of the Compact City exhibition, Art and Liberation, Europe 1943 to 1967, Revolting People exhibition, and the Move, the City Laboratory of Dance, Improvisation, and Monument in relation to architecture and public space. She's also author and curator of the research projects Kill Your Idol, Psychoanalysis of Contemporary Architecture of the City of Brno, involved in the Asking Architecture winning project for the exhibition in the Czech and Slovak Pavilion at the 13th International Architecture Exhibition in Venice 2012 Biennale. She was a lecturer of feminist art history and modern architecture in Department of Art and History at the Faculty of Arts at Masaryk University in Brno, and is a member of independent film platform Guerrilla Film and co-founder of the online magazine Art Talk, focusing on contemporary art and architecture. Wow, this is a lot. I'm very much impressed.
Petra will hold a speech now about feminist urban planning. And now I will introduce her two partners of the conversation. On my left is Sarah Rivière. She's British and German and an architect and architectural researcher. She develops new constructions that are sustainable. She's doing also research in the architectural theory. She creates animated movies to show us about how we can live together in the future. She also writes for architectural magazines, for example, the Footprint Journal. And she's teaching at the Institute for Architecture at the TU in Berlin. And since 2019, together with Mattia Rutter-Wulik, she led the project Frau Architekt, Mrs. Architect. And this is a group of Berlin architects. And she's one of the activists of the architect network NAILS. Then we have Gudrun Sack here. She's member of the board of the Architect Chamber in Germany. She also supported our symposium, which we think is very important, and we are very grateful for that. And we're glad to have one of the protagonists here. She's also an architect and is very active about new construction of new building and also sustainable planning and construction. She's trying to support good architecture in the public view, and she's also on the board of the network Berliner Baugruppenarchitekten. She's on the board of the Chamber of Architects since 2016, and since 2005 she's also in the Committee for Sustainable Construction and Living. These are the talkers, and I'm very looking forward to.
Thank you so much. May I ask you the last questions? It was 3 questions. May you repeat them again, because I think they're.
It's basically one question, but I divided it to these 3. You want all 3 to repeat to me?
Yeah, just like as bullets, just...
Yeah, if the fair shared city, if it's in like the concept of fair shared city, if it's enough for help women to be more visible and important in decisive positions in society, if does it help to persons with care tasks to be more active on political and decision level, and if the fact that the persons with care and household tasks can use the city more comfortable and are more visible in public space, can be some breaking point in this question of emancipation, real emancipation in society.
Ja, nachdem das ja jetzt als ein Zwiegespräch erstmal angelegt ist oder ein Trialog, in den Sie natürlich dann auch gleich einsteigen können, würde ich mich freuen, wenn ihr beide vielleicht auf diese Fragen eingeht. Wir haben ja auch einige Beispiele jetzt genannt bekommen aus Wien. Eine scherzhafte Nebenbemerkung. Ich finde es interessant, dass auch aus Tschechien der Blick nach Wien geht. Ich dachte, das ist so ein deutsches Phänomen, ein Berliner Phänomen, dass wir immer, wenn wir was Gutes zitieren wollen, schauen wir nach Wien, aber es scheint sich ja international durchzusetzen. Bitte, wer möchte? Das Mikrofon ist schon in der Hand, ja.
Thank you so much for that really fascinating talk, and I think this is a really important, vital question because I'm here as a member of NAILS, which is the network for women architects, engineers, interior architects, landscape architects, and urban planners here in Berlin. And one of the things that we're very concerned about is this, visible, deep-rooted, well-documented disparity. What really concerns us is, in the architectural profession, but also in the players in the built environment. This for me is more a question of, the importance of getting the disparate players active in the field. And naturally, it's incredibly important to have playgrounds which encourage girls to be active in public space, where they feel comfortable, where they feel, invited by the playground, that the playground is actively offering them a space where they, feel invited to dwell and to engage. This is an incredibly important thing. And also, the question of, physical location and proximity of and facility. You also have this. It's just the real energy that is needed in everyday life as for everybody, men and women, and to make this easier for people to move through public space, to engage in public space. These are all incredibly important things. Where I'm coming from is really more the question of, within the architectural profession, for example, there are, we see this disparity which still exists in the profession. We see a lack of, we see women falling out of the profession at regular intervals. It is a real concern, why this drain of talent is still going on. Why women are, if you put enough hurdles in people's way, a number of them will drop out. And these are voices that are dropping out and they're not being heard. Real concrete problems that are still there. that, you know, at Nails with our network we're trying to address.
There were a few questions. Well, the case is that more women study architecture than men, but in the practice, the women are the ones who are not as much coming forward as the men. Are there different spatial differences if women or men do the concepts? And then the positions in the society. I mean, it is not only an advantage if the woman is up, has a high position and power. It is also important that the woman acts differently from how the men act. And often it is the case that these women in power actually act even worse than the men. So to have all women up on the power board is not the only solution. It is important that in the implementations they have different focuses than before. Also, when it comes to spatial, for the spatial context, that we need a new focus. For example, if we think about climate change, or we look at the pictures, we can't construct in this way anymore. We need more space for family and children and also the environment. So in the apprenticeship, in the training in Germany, but also in Austria, I guess, we don't have disadvantages, not in the school, in the education at school, or in the architectural education. Maybe because architecture is a branch which has to deal with power and with money. And I can tell you, a lot of constructionists says we don't want to cooperate with women. They just don't want it because they don't have these positions that they represent. So that is why it's important that more women go into these high positions and act differently and advocate different things. Then of course we need to work in the public sphere, in public relation. Of course education is important, but in public relations we have to be much more present. We have to focus on different topics. Women have to strive for positions in power and to get more money to be able to push through their concerns. And then to the question if women have other focuses when it comes to spatial matters, I pass the floor to Elke. I did not want to continue on that picture. Sorry, this is Elke Duda. She's also from the network of Nails. If someone does not know you. Okay, thank you. I can't really answer that question. In our network we have discussed a lot about this question. We have had very controversial debates, and in the end we decided to not discuss this anymore because we say it is difficult and tiring to discuss if women have different concepts or if they think in a different way, if they design in different ways. Because, as we mentioned before, women are not a group, they are not a class, they are not those women. Yet I wanted to add a question also concerning Vienna, because Vienna is described as the best city with the best living standards in the world. But I did not understand when you said that gender mainstreaming in the practice, in the planning, is that new or have they been doing this for a while? To me, it sounded as if it's a new approach, a new planning approach.
No, I said that it's that in Vienna it started already in '91. Yeah, it was the beginning of it. but it's like the best example of this like tool, because it's like more the most complex. It's like the most developed in the city in different layers, and the city also is more compact somehow, and it's more visible there, and the strategies of the municipality is really, they are really long-term and good structured, and they have big research. And I think this is one. When I was making research about it, about gender mainstreaming, and also I, for example, was trying to find the information also about Berlin, Stockholm, and so on. So there is like more separated examples of this practice. I don't mean the manual. The manual is also really developed and good. It's a good work also. But in the practice, it was just examples in the city, But in Vienna, they really develop it in large way. They have a lot of examples in different quarters or in this municipal level. So it was just an example. So I wanted to show, and I think that today it became to be the topic also for the other cities. Now it's more developed in also other cities than Vienna. In Vienna, it's a really old thing already.
I prefer to speak in German because my English is not good enough for this discussion. But here in Berlin, in the 90s, we had exactly this gender mainstreaming movement, as I would call it, and it was coming from the Senate. It was initiated by the Senate, and there are a lot of books and very comprehensive books about that, and there was also a women's council and the advisory board for women, or the jurors and the commissions. They were checking the gender mainstreaming situation, but on the whole, I must say that it has become very quiet about that topic. It has been not heard from it so much anymore. Is very mitigated, and the question in the end is, who is going to implement it in the end? I mean, I want to finish. For example, the playgrounds we've talked about. There are also lots of examples here in Berlin. Here at this point, I would like to know, when we talk about gender mainstreaming as a method in planning workshops or in the planning process, if it is used, how does this method actually look like in detail? And when they use that method, how did you perceive it? Maybe we can describe the method a bit, not just the concept, but the method, because in the discourse maybe it has not been developed completely. I mean, I want to see the method in Berlin, but also the one that has been used in Vienna to get to results. Just a sketch of how it looks like.
And I can maybe I can compare the method of urban planning of Vienna and of Brno, for example. Because what I think it's very important on gender mainstreaming is communication and cooperation, of different levels of planning, of implementing the changes in the streets. I mean, like in some really specific spaces, because in Brno there is, for example, big problem of of coordination of works in the street, for example. We can be really concrete. We can really, speak on this practical level. When you are reconstructing some street, there is different groups, different target groups, in the process. I mean, it can be the company who is making reconstruction. It can be the people who are responsible for the water tubes, the people who are responsible for the trees, and the people who are responsible for, I don't know, the cycle paths and so on. And in Brno, it happened really often that there is no one office, like the city office, who would be the mediator, who would say, okay, the city wants to make it gender sensitive, and here is the concept, here is the manual of gender sensitive city or street planning, and we have to survey these rules. And okay, let's make a big meeting together of all these representatives from all these groups, and let's talk about it, how to do it, and how to implement these rules. So this is a big problem, because then suddenly you find out that there is no cyclopath, there is no walk paths for the trolleys, for the mothers with children. There is no trees for making the street more livable in summer and so on. And this is, I think that what is important, what Vienna did, is that they made all this process of cooperation and implementation of these little details alive, So this is, and the other point is that this is also about participation of citizens. This whole process, it means to give the power to the people who live in the area to be in the common meeting, to say what they need, to be part of workshop, to try to find. But I think it's in Berlin. This is very common, But in Czech Republic, as a post-communist country, this is a very big problem. And the other question, what is very interesting for me about gender mainstreaming, is how to adapt it to our situation, because this is also in urban, in urban structure. It is different, in urban structure and thinking about urban planning. It's mostly the thinking is still on this municipal level, like post-communist. That the urban planning means to make the city for cars. So the participation, communication, and cooperation, it sounds banal and easy, but as I know from our cities, it's not easy. There is no structure for it. There is no office. There is no mediators. There is no people really who know really this gender mainstreaming really good. One example I can say, it's Metropolitan Institute in Prague. This is a new institution developed for this kind of thinking about the city, and they are implementing now this participation in urban planning now. They are making workshops there and so on. This is the only institution, and then some organizations like 50%, for example, or City Public Space Prague. It's also a non-profit organization. They are dealing with the topic, but on the municipal level, this is not existing. And I think that it would be also really interesting in the question of segregated areas, which we have a really big problem in Czech Republic, or these immigrant areas, which is maybe more here, because they have also different needs, different topics, different cultural things to solve. So for me, these questions are really interesting. How to adapt it, how this rule adapt to different situations, not just this Vienna example, because the city is like already perfect, we can say, And I think that is like more important maybe question to deal with now, like, I mean, in some international level.
We have to also look at the time, and we still want to jump back and forth a few times, so let's I think Berlin's reputation is better than it actually is. Now we're talking about positions of society again, because we have, for example, a female president in the police, and this woman is taking care that in public space there's no fear anymore, that you don't build spaces where women are afraid, but it is because we have a woman in that position who is also working in the planning lobby. And we also should integrate the youth into the urban planning, because we need more spaces for children and for the youth, because we always talked about the women, but of course the lobby for the youth is still missing and should be strengthened. But in the discussion in Berlin, there is a bigger discussion about participation now, that the residents should be heard more, but these demands you were talking about, they are not as strong here as like in Vienna. I mean, Vienna has a tradition in participation and in thinking together. We don't have this here, unfortunately. Everybody thinks Berlin is so cool, but unfortunately it's not that cool.
I mean, what really comes across here is this idea of the detail, that this system is creating real change in the details, you know, and architects say sometimes the devil is in the detail and sometimes God is in the detail.
Not just architects say that.
Not just architects.
I suppose not. But they do, definitely.
They definitely do. And they can get a bit neurotic about the details, but, you know, these details of everyday life, this shows a level of care, you know, for the population, that these instruments are there, that people are being asked, that voices are being heard. You know, this is a sort of, I don't know if the German word Fürsorge is right, but it's this level of solicitude that, for example, was very much missing in the description that we heard about sexual liberation socialist style from Katharina, you know, where we had a state instrument that was being very much, you know, imposed. The state can basically decide a lot and has very powerful instruments. And this move to like use care in these instruments is incredibly important and incredibly welcome. But for me, it is only part of the story.
Are there any other comments? Comments, questions? Okay, come to the table, please. Yes, of course. I would like to lose a few words about the question of gender mainstreaming as a method. Because in the decisive positions and the vital positions, like, for example, the director of the police, it is different when there is a method, because we need to not only have participatory processes, but that we can also ask whatever I will build, if it is a building, a street, or a playground, to check who are the people who are supposed to use it, and in what living conditions do they live, and can they also use it? I mean, is it really for them of advantage? And then what you said is right, that youth and children are not as integrated. and not visible enough, but they also have a gender, the young people. Then something like in Berlin happens that they have playgrounds, they build playgrounds, but then they realize, oh, we also need playgrounds that are good for the girls, and we need playgrounds for playing football, for example, for girls. And then the stereotype can happen, like that they say, okay, for the boys we will create a space for playing football, and for the girls we create a space where they can throw gymnastic balls or something like this. This is a problem again when we talk about gender mainstreaming, that it is very looking at the two genders. And but as a principle, I would still say it is a good thing and should be used in the planning process to ask who are the potential users and what does it mean for our planning and also the implementation later. So not in the end when it's already been built to think, okay, how does it work now? No, that we integrate it into the planning process. This is already more than the participatory process in which the users are being asked afterwards what they would like, but systematically they get the critical perspective to look at the processes of planning. And then I would like to talk about one experience, because one of you said in the education or in the trainings we don't have a problem. But in my Center for Interdisciplinary Research for Women and Gender Studies, explicit, we're cooperating with the natural sciences, but also the urban planning and architecture and landscape planning, where the students systematically learn how to have a critical gender view or perspective, and to learn how to implement that in their studies. And when I look at the students who are studying the landscape planning, for example, this is an additional program. It is not integrated into the actual studies. They do this voluntarily. And if those students say, I only understood now that what I do has an impact on the people who are using it, because I am creating their environment, then something is really going wrong in the education or in the apprenticeship for architects or urban planners. Because this is what they're doing is something, creating something that's socially important. If they don't understand that and learn that in their training, then something is going wrong, because you have to consider social questions in urban planning. And this is why I think we need to change the education systematically, and this is why we need more women in the higher positions there. I have also built a bigger Berlin building, and I was part of the building team, and I know how the builders react when they have a woman as their leading architect, and then the workers say, oh, she can't do that, and then I try to build it in a different way in their own planning. This is really the case. But in the trainings, we need a different kind of training that is not only sensitive towards gender, but also in broadly. I'm very grateful for this contribution, Mrs. Haag, because there's so much you talked about. You could speak about the whole education of architects, but this is why I asked my question in the beginning. We were talking about the method, because we agree that in the result, the gender mainstreaming, when we think about who are we planning this for, that we have a reflective approach here, that the user is also thought of as a producer. I think we agree on that, but what irritates me in this gender mainstream method is this implementation, how it is implemented. That's why I asked for the method again. Because I think the progressive discourse about gender does not correlate with this implementation, how everything was just like implemented without reflection in the 90s. That this is not easy to combine anymore, that the protagonists of the gender debate have survived the method, but the method is still in need for reform. This is why I asked about the implementation of the method. The other aspect was that it is always surprising to hear that the students are not aware that they are working on a construction of space, and what they are designing is a part of something, and that they should also look at the impact it has. I mean, this is a huge problem of the education of urban planners. For example, we organized together with 6 universities a business game or simulation game, and for architects it was a mixture of simulation game and also role play. So the students, they played certain roles, and very quickly you could see that the planning is first of all perceived as non-political, and also what we could see is that politics is something that is only a medial matter, and also the planners, you could see that they have an access to the political sphere because planning is local politics. So it was not on the agenda, but always when we talk about building culture, for example, there was a culture magazine who wrote about right-wing space, because they are in Charlottenburg, Wilmersdorf, they are very run-down buildings, but I don't want to prevail on this. It just became clear that if this is not understood in the education, in the architecture education, that building culture is also dealing with the politics, with society, then they think it has to do with material or materialistic matters. But in the building culture is also focused on the relationship between the people who are part of the building and construction process. And here I'm not talking only about the view about the topic of gender, but also the transdisciplinary participation. Who is building, who is taking part in the building, from the builder or the building's owner to the worker, the builder. And now I have to look at the time. It's 6 o'clock and we'll have food again now. And in the end, now I would like to give each of you the possibility to have a conclusive remark. Also, if anyone around us wants to say something, but definitely Sarah, Gudrun, Mrs. Duda and Petra. I will start because I want to answer to both questions. I disagree that the women in construction have a problem. That is not true. There are offices where there's just women in the construction, and it's the opposite. The men are like little chicken, and there's like a chicken fight. And if there's a woman coming on her high heels and says, "Come on, do this, do that," it works really well. So I would say women don't have a problem in high positions in construction management. But the other thing is that as architects and planners in Berlin, but also generally in Germany, we are losing our ground because of economical problems. We're not speaking about climate or migration, we're talking about economy. And as architects, we are not represented in the political sphere, we are not in the media. This is why our status is very bad in politics, so we can't really have an impact.
Just very briefly, one thing I would just like to say, I have a slightly different position to Gudrun about whether or not women design differently. I mean, I think we've heard today from the history that women don't necessarily vote differently. You know, before women were given the vote, there was this question of, you know, like, would they all vote in a particular way? But I think that, you know, talent and vote, you know, how you vote is not connected to gender. But what is important is that we have this diversity, that the population as a whole, you know, if we have 50 or 51% women in the population, if we have this percentage of, you know, children, if we have this percentage of minorities, if we have this percentage of homeless people in the society, that these people's voices, this diversity of voice, we need instruments, state instruments. The state has to have an interest in giving these people a voice, you know, on Augenhöhe, this wonderful German word, like on equal eye level, to ensure that people's voices are heard and brought into the conversation.
I agree, and I also think that this is a social thing that everybody who's participating in the construction should be considered. And now coming back to the method, in a nutshell, the administrations like to reduce the method to a checklist. So you have the competition, and then you have the jury, and there is a commissioner for gender mainstreaming who will, with difficulty, work on a checklist and have that checklist and go down the list. I am not from the Senate, so I don't know how exactly it happens, but I have had a lot of talks about that and heard a lot about this. Of course, maybe this is a bit exaggerated, but mostly it is working like this because they are not ready to see this complexity in the urban planning process. And yet, I would like to still consider this because next year we have women in architecture in Berlin in 2020, together with the chamber for architects, together with our networks. And in this event we try to integrate lots of different actors and to speak about the topic women in planning and urban planning. And then we should discuss if women are in power, the perspective is going to shift and also the decisions will change. So this is why this was also very interesting to me and important to me, because I'm planning this event and then I think we can think about what has happened to this mainstreaming method and how is it taking place and where was it successful.
Petra.
I just wanted to come back to my questions from the beginning, and because maybe they were too complex or too complicated. Also, I just wanted to say that I think that gender mainstreaming is just, or in urban planning is just a part of the solution. Yeah, because without the support from the side of the state, support for people who are taking care of children, of parents, etc. Some active role of women in society wouldn't be possible. And I mean some really specific examples like kindergarten or this kind of services. So yeah, it can be part of the answer to my questions.
Okay, when you said that you would come back to your first questions, I would also like to make a remark. What I thought was very interesting was the formulation of having a closer look. Before I say something about that, I also want to raise the question about the notion care. I was in an artist talk recently where they talked about female artists and the difference in their statues, and there was also this connection between taking care, and someone attacked that because they think care is a very conservative notion. And in that moment I realized that this is the problem, that the connection is still there, that the woman is in charge of that. And I hope that this is changing in the labor world. But if you look at these different examples and also the triangles that you've talked about, then you notice that there are these kind of schemes, and you can also use them and apply them on men. Okay, then the man goes in this triangle. But I think, is that really the right way? If you say we want to overcome this dualism of gender, because that can't be the solution, then I come to this closer look and the reductions or generalizations. And I thought that was very exciting. In 2017 we had a lot of talks about the performative element of the city, and there we also came to that closer look, that the performative understanding of urban planning, I don't mean urban planning should have only including events or something like this. I meant to really look exactly at the needs and to individualize, to look at the individual needs. I mean, that doesn't fit into the economic constraints. If they want to be fast, then we just look how many square meters and so on. But in the discourse about sustainability, this fits in, and the participation discourse. So this performance is also vital for understanding gender mainstreaming. And in relation to this closer look, I can imagine this as a future perspective where we can define planning again. But if no one really wants to disagree with me now,
noch was anfügen möchte. Bitte, ich habe die ganze Zeit schon gefragt, Helena.
I wondered, Helena, if you're going to say something.
I was kind of organizing something, but yeah, well, the thing you mentioned was like this manifesto of the Feminist Arts Institution. It's actually a group from Prague.
The topic was care.
Yeah. Who did like a manifesto for like different structuring of institutions based on care, which was like some kind of a code of practice. Because it was like kind of young artists and curators having their children, so they were like kind of thinking about like a more ethical code of practice within the institutions. So maybe yeah. And and there was like one more thing with this care. I mean, like these like young women. Actually, we found out that also young architects. I was doing a study on urban spaces in Belgrade, and also like these young architects and young women, they spend a lot of time in urban spaces. So that's maybe, and they are also like having some activist like way of caring about their neighborhoods. We did like this one study in Belgrade, and yeah, so I think that could be also like one perspective, like that these women, they don't play like in the upper positions, but actually they do a lot of things for the neighborhood through their networking and through organizing events and taking care of the surroundings, which is not being evaluated by the society enough. It's like taking care of the children, so it's like taking care of the surroundings, and that should be also like mentioned more frequently.
Urban level, yeah. Thank
I
you.
just have a
Okay,
quick notion.
then the last
I don't
word.
know if I understood you good, but I just wanted to say that I also don't like this thinking about caregivers as women, of course, because we have to, I think, be more queer and think out of the box. But this is a fact that it's still more women, and not just according to the data and analysis, but also we can see it everywhere, I think. So in this case, I would be really precise and say, okay, it's still women, and we have to, deal with this somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to find actions which help immediately, but with a
And this
same time
this
broader
is the reason why
thinking.
I was asking these questions, because
Yeah.
gender mainstreaming is still working with status quo.
Yes,
Of
course. Yeah.
And not try to change it somehow so radically, just support these people or try to make their situation better in the city. But this is not the revolution, this is not the change. It's just
Wie man so schön
somehow
sagt,
can be also reinforcing this is just for as a question to the further discussion.
Yeah.
Of course, one does not exclude the other one. So when I look around, I don't see anyone protesting. So I just like to thank you a lot, Petra, for your great talk. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Gudrun. Thank you for the people taking part. Now we're making a break. And then we come to the fourth part, the evening part. This is a debate about emancipation. And in 15 or 30 minutes. But now we'll have something to eat for everybody here at the buffet.